Hello everybody and welcome to the next video in our series of videos on the Symposium by Plato. So today what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at Plato and Socrates, and we're going to be looking a little bit at the method that these two famous philosophers used to find meaning and truth in the world. So the first video we looked at what philosophy was, and now we're going to look at the two of the most important philosophers of all time. This isn't going to be an in-depth biography or explanation of their ideas, because this is many of your first time doing philosophy. It's just a very brief introduction. Sometimes people can get confused in the distinction between Plato and Socrates, and so this video is designed to deal with that confusion. Socrates is the main character or the protagonist in the book, The Symposium, and Plato is attributed as the author, the writer of the book. So what we're going to look at first is we're going to look at Socrates and a bit of his life, and then we'll come back around to Plato. So Socrates was born around 480 BCE, died in 399 BCE, right around the end of the Athenian Golden Age. He was born in Athens. He was actually sentenced to death in 399 BCE because he was accused of corrupting the youth, because the questions he asked and the philosophical inquiries he made undermined a lot of institutions within ancient Greek society. And this wasn't out of any kind of vindictive nature. It was out of searching for truth and meaning. So what method did Socrates use? Socrates used a method that's known as the Dialectic, or the Socratic method. And this is really basically a conversation. It's a way of kind of exposing truth through a dialogue. So what would generally happen was Socrates would go to somebody and he would ask them about their knowledge on a certain subject. So for example, when we talk about, he might go to a judge and ask a judge about justice, them being considered an expert on the topic, and the judge would duly reply and give a summary of what they believe justice to be. And a lot of people back then would have been, a lot of the aristocrats would have been quite good at rhetoric and at speeches and things like this, so they could give quite eloquent kind of answers, and it would be based on kind of a rational argument. So what I mean by that is that they would say something like, they'd make a statement, so they'd call that statement A, and you go, statement A plus statement B equals statement C, and statement C would be, for example, their definition of what justice is. Based on these two statements I made previously, this is what I feel justice is. And from a logical standpoint, it seems to make sense. But what Socrates would do is he would question the first statement that they made. He said, right, well, you said this, but did you mean it in this way, or did you mean it in that way? And the person would kind of have to go back and think about their first assumption or their first statement, and they'd have to go, well, I meant it this way. And inevitably, Socrates would then, through follow-up questions, he would expose the contradictions within their first assumption, which we know that if something's contradictory, it can't be true. So generally he would end each conversation completely dispelling the person's definition of whatever it is he asked him for. So in this book, it's going to be a lot of people talking quite eloquently about what love is, and then when Socrates comes to give his speech, he's going to dispel a lot of their ideas. Now, this book isn't exactly heavy on the dialectical method, but it is shown near the end. And it's an important thing to understand in moving forward with Socrates. Socrates was famous for having said, all I know is that I know nothing. And this is the approach that we really want to take. And it's really an approach that can be taken for life. We can't be 100% sure on really anything. That might shock some people, but it's kind of it's the truth of it. Like we can't be sure on anything, and when we learn something, we don't necessarily go from being wrong to right because we've learned this thing. We generally we go from being wrong to slightly less wrong. And Socrates and his questioning of our assumptions and what we believe are facts and truth, they really stand us. They really stands towards what we should do in life. So instead of always looking to be right all the time, like we should be looking at how we're wrong all the time. Look for the fallacies in our arguments, look for the things that are wrong in our arguments, and be open, and don't become so entrenched, because when we become entrenched in what we're doing, it's hard to change someone who believes they're completely true. But if we're open to, I may not be 100% right on this, then we can grow. Conflict isn't as strong. You can see it in people, because the more certain they seem to be about something, then they almost exude more uncertainty and insecurity, and they're willing to really go to extremes to defend their position if they feel it's under threat. So that's the framework we're going to be working from in our classes. We're going to be looking from a point of view where we feel that we know nothing. So as I said, Socrates was a famous philosopher who went around Athens asking people questions, and inevitably he gathered a bit of a following, and people liked what he was doing, and they followed him around and took notes on what he was doing. And one of his most famous followers was the author of this book, Plato. Socrates never actually wrote anything down. A lot of what we know about Socrates comes from texts from Plato. We get some other sources, some other followers who also wrote stuff about Socrates, but Plato was our main source of Socratic ideas. So, but Plato in himself is no slouch in the philosophical world, and in many ways he surpasses his teacher. And it's his ideas that will shape philosophy for the next 2,000 years, whether it's people trying to prove his ideas or trying to refute his ideas. He's the most important philosopher of all time. So Plato, after the death of Socrates, shunned a life in politics which he was moving towards, and instead decided to devote his life to philosophy, to the search for meaning and truth. Initially, what he started to do in his early writings, we started writing things down. He tried to record the conversations that Socrates had all around Athens with these people on many different topics. As time went by, Plato began to develop his own philosophy. He got his own ideas, which is inevitable. As we study something, we begin to get ideas ourselves. And Plato was no different. And as his writing evolved, he began to use Socrates not as faithfully as he had in his early texts. He used Socrates as the mouthpiece for his own ideas. And the book we're looking at, the Symposium, is one of these kind of books. It's kind of known as the middle writings of Plato. So the earlier writings were very faithful to Socrates' ideas. In the middle writings, he starts to just move away from all of Socrates' ideas and put his own ideas in there. And we'll see that when we look at the theory of the forms later on. And that is something that is purely Plato's idea, and that he puts in the mouth of Socrates in his books. So now we've seen Socrates and we've seen Plato, and we've also had a look at the dialectic model in which they used to search for their meaning and their truth. So hopefully this has kind of clarified who Socrates is, who Plato is, giving you a little bit of insight into what the dialectic method is, and hopefully moving forward we can take these lessons that we've learned from this video and apply it to our future thinking.